went back in time to kill the evil from the future. Corinlock said to himself, this place was created to manage the special demi-humans in the school. A student said, this way, chop it up, good job. At the integrated dormitory, Corinlock said to himself, in other words, it is a dormitory made to quarantine Hwoarang and Mariette, even though she is a professor who was appointed as the supervisor due to a staff shortage. Professor Josephine said, what is that? It is a bluefin tuna. Hwoarang said, the eyes are good for IQ or something like that. Professor Josephine said, Student Corin. As Corinlock and Alicia Arden prepares the fish, Mariette Dunalev said, please move it over here. Professor Josephine said, an explanation, please. Corinlock said, haha. Corinlock said to himself, I am also basically serving as the assistant supervisor. Mariette said she would have many guests, so she needed large furniture. Mariette Dunalev said, please be careful while moving this way. A man said, Mr. Kim, if it falls on you, you will die. Lift it carefully. Corinlock said, Hwoarang bought a bluefin tuna at the market, so we decided to eat it together. Hwoarang said, I do not want to. It is mine. Corinlock said, and Alicia came to help. As Alicia Arden used her Arden-style sashimi technique, thin slicing as he chopped the bluefin tuna with precision, as she said, Gurmur murmur murmur, Corinlock gives a thumbs up to Professor Josephine and said, Irashaimase, please sit over here. I will give you a good price. Professor Josephine said, please quit it. I need you to clean this up and get the rooms ready for the first years you told me about. Corinlock said, I can do it quickly by myself. The first years I mentioned are a brother and sister pair, so they can just sleep in one room. Professor Josephine said, Hyungnim, no, I will help you with the rooms. There are actually 2 other rooms to prepare. More importantly, there are new first years coming to the academy tomorrow. Could I ask you to guide them? As Corinlock made a sushi, Corinlock with a devilish look said, Hee. I will, if you listen to my request. A few moments later, Corinlock said to himself, the responsibility of guiding first years is always given to the outstanding second-year students. As Mariette Dunalev said, hello, everyone, Corinlock said to himself, and Mariette is now a third year. Corinlock said, now, on the left is the creation building. And he said to himself, thus the one guiding the first years is, Corinlock said, it is the building where students of the magic world gather and conduct research. Are there any questions? As Hwoarang holds a sign saying happy enrollment, the students shouted, Hyung, you are so cool, the suit fits so well on you. Corinlock said, looks like the reaction of the female students is lukewarm. Then to show off my charm. Maybe a song. Hwoarang said, stop that. As Corinlock was hit in the head by Hwoarang, and he said that concludes the tour, the professors are waiting inside. Good luck in there. As his head ache, Hwoarang gives back the sign and said, I will go first. Corinlock said, huh? All of a sudden, Hwoarang said, I am late. Someone annoying came to find me. Corinlock said, who? Hwoarang leaps away and said, someone. Corinlock said to himself, they said not to fly while inside the academy. It finally feels real after guiding the new students. It is finally a new semester. Ren said, Hyungnim. Let us head inside too. Corinlock said, all right. Ren, you do well too. Ren said, we will probably handle it fine on our own. Corinlock said to himself, it is not like the first years are all unknown, but these guys will probably get the most attention, right? In a distance, Alicia Arden said, whoo, this way. Watch your step when you get off. Corinlock said, Alicia, you were in charge of the west gate, right? Alicia Arden said, be careful coming down. A voice suddenly said, you are Sir Corin, right? As Corinlock was shocked and said, Ga. The lady said, it is nice to meet you, Sir Corin. My name is Miriam Elizabeth L. Rass. Corinlock said to himself, my prediction that Ren and Ron would be the freshmen with the most attention was wrong. Alicia Arden said in shock, gasp. Corinlock kneels down, and he said to himself, while one may not recognize their face or first name, there is no one who would not know the surname El Ras. This person is the second princess of this country, and the villainess of heroic legend of Arhan's era. As he kissed Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross's hands. As he looks at Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross, Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, your etiquette is excellent. Did you study it? Corinlock said, I learned it from someone I know. Corinlock said to himself, the truth is, as he remembered his past Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross saying, when a lovely lady stands before him, a gentleman should kiss her hand and ask for a dance. Corinlock said to himself, she is the person who taught me. Of course. Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, Sir Corin, look, is it not pretty? Our child. Corinlock said to himself, some other things also happened. As Corinlock sweats and said to himself, we met in my last life as well, but not inside the academy. Suddenly a voice said, is that Sir Corin? Corinlock was shocked and said to himself, in the scenario, the princesses are still. Estelle Hadasha El Ras said, hello? I am Estelle Hadasha El Ras. Shall we shake hands? Corinlock stood up and said, I greet Saintess Estelle Hadasha El Ras, and he shook her delicate soft hands. Estelle Hadasha El Ras said, do not be so formal. We are both students at the same school. I am using informal language, am I not? Looks like Mir was also here. I almost did not see you because you are so small. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, I thought I told you not to call me that, Estelle. Estelle Hadasha El Ras said, should you not call me Unimir? Though Sunbay is fine too. It has been a little over 2 years since I took a leave of absence, but I have returned starting today. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, titles of respect are given to those who are above you. The only thing you have more than me are some useless lumps of flesh. She turns around and said, Alicia Sunbay Nim, I am going to make my way to the free hall. Thank you for the escort. Estelle Hadasha El Ras said, looks like I will have to go too. See you again, Hubei Nim Alicia Arden Dizzy said, okay. No, it is an honor as vast as the sea. Your Highness, Corinlock said. Oh, as he froze and said, I am in deep trouble. A few moments later, Ren said, wow. Nuna, are we going to live here now? Ren said, do not act like such a country bumpkin. Ren said, but, it is so big. It is like a palace. Suddenly, Miriam Elizabeth El Ras bumps Ren and said, Ron jumps to the other side of Ren and said, sorry. As Ren looks at Miriam Elizabeth El Ras. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, I am Miriam Elizabeth El Ras. We are in the same year. Shall we shake hands? Ron said, low, as she tries to shake hands. Suddenly, Miriam Elizabeth El Ras grabs her wrist and said, incredible. As Ron was startled and said, Ack. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, we captured and killed every single beastman we saw. There were still some of you disgusting mutts left alive. Touch my staff one more time, and I will have you stuffed alive. Got it? As Ron cries and tries to bow down. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras walks away and said to himself, I feel like I am walking on thin ice. I seriously have no idea what might happen next. These two characters were originally introduced much later in the story, so they were not even supposed to show up at the academy. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras, Estelle Hadasha El Ras. Corinlock said to himself, yet now they appeared at the same time. I do not know which butterfly rascal flapped their wings. I guess it was probably because of Nazria's purification. I was too careless. My life is completely ruined. Another wing flap caused a tornado. Suddenly the professor said, Student Corinlock. Corinlock was startled and said, yes. The professor said, seems like you are having trouble focusing from the first day. Corinlock said, my apologies. The professor said, can you explain the concept of the justice of the peace? Corinlock said, that is, the professor said, marks deducted. Corinlock said, sugar. Who actually teaches class on the first day? A few moments later, Corinlock said, grumble. It is an unwritten rule to just go through orientation and then to finish class early on the first day. Did everyone else finish moving in? Corinlock said to himself, the original plan was just to have Professor Josephine, Mariette, Warren, the Wolf siblings, and me in the special dormitory. As Professor Josephine said, there are actually 2 other rooms to prepare. Corinlock said to himself, she said 2 more people were coming, did she not? No way. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said seductively, come here, Sir Corin. You need to maintain etiquette, do you not? Here, kiss it. As she extends her hand, Corinlock said a gentleman only kisses a lady's hand once a day, Your Highness. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, hoo, how interesting. How does a commoner know the etiquette of nobles? Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, I will be blunt. When the royal succession starts next year, support me. Corinlock said, I am just a lowly guardian. What could you possibly gain from my support? Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, aren't you leaving out the part where you're a knight, one who carries a holy relic recognized by both the Catholic and Protestant churches, Klaus Solas? Hey, it seems you have many thoughts. Are you suspicious of me? In that case, I suppose I can pay you in advance. As Miriam Elizabeth El Ras grabs Corinlock close and Corinlock said, as they lie on the ground. Miriam Elizabeth El Ras said, go on then. Tell me what you want from this royal whom no one has ever dared to touch. I'll indulge you. Whatever pleasure you crave, go ahead, you may ask me for anything. As Corinlock was bewitched, Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, I give you permission to do whatever you want, so whisper your love to me. Yes, O hero, my destiny, devour me and make me yours. Corin Locke said, Hoob. Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross puts out her tongue as Corin Locke opens the window. Ain, he said, gasp, huff, huff. Corin Locke said, you even used an aphrodisiac incense to try and seduce me. Sharp breath that doesn't seem like something a noble on the verge of inheriting the throne should be doing. Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, a union with the sun god's champion would be a useful political card. Marriage and childbearing are the oldest forms of political transactions, Sir Corin. Corin Locke said, what did you mean by destiny? Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, I don't know what you're talking about. Corin Locke said, well, let's leave it at that then. Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross sat down and said, should I maybe set the mood a little better next time? Corin Locke said, there's no need for that. Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, you might change your mind once you hear my conditions. How are you so confident in your decision? Corin Locke said, I learned from someone I know to be careful of beautiful women. As he shuts the door, Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, then I'll just have to work harder, as she licked her lips. Corin Locke said to himself, gasp, huff, huff, that was dangerous. It feels like I've been finding myself in situations like this a lot lately. As he remembers Mariette Dunna left blushing and said to him after finishing a meal, Corin, thanks again for today. Corin Locke said to himself, Mariette was like this. Alicia Arden said, then brother-in-law. Corin Locke said, ooh-ah, I understand that you chose theater for your elective. But why did you choose a play about an affair of all things, Alicia? It's a beautiful story, Corin Locke said to himself. Alicia was also like that. And then, Hua does this every chance she gets. Corin Locke said, do you really like it that much? Warren looks at their hands together and said, Corin Locke said to himself, ever since I swallowed the sun, my body has been overflowing with yang energy. Since Hua releases an endless stream of yin energy due to her 9 yin meridians physique, supposedly even touching me feels really good. Corin Locke said, Hua, let us wrap this up. Break time is over. Rand said, hee, just a little longer, Corin Locke said to himself. And Rand comes out once in a while as well. A few moments later, Lork Bugman said, I see, it must have been hard. Ah, so what you are saying is you are troubled about how many women are clinging to your body, right? Corin Locke said, exactly. Lork Bugman took a sip of his milk and said, Corin, I am saying this sincerely as your friend and yourself. For real. As he gave Corin Locke a Japanese finger. Jaeger Hinspeter said, just pick one then. Corin Locke said, why are you two acting so mad all of a sudden? Lork Bugman said, it is useless, Jaeger. Let us just eliminate this playboy rascal ourselves. Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross suddenly said, Corin Sunbay, hello? Corin Locke sweats and said, Hoo P, princess. What brings you here? Hoo Miriam Elizabeth L. Ross said, I am going to the city center soon. Will you not give me a tour? Corin Locke said, well, all right. As Lork Bugman and Jaeger Hinspeter drools at the background, Jaeger Hinspeter said, I do not think we need to step in. It feels like he is about to get split 5 ways any second now. Lork Bugman said, I was jealous at first, but now I am starting to think we should approach this academically. I think that guy's body is actually releasing pheromones, and for some reason our immune systems prevent them from affecting us. Jaeger Hinspeter said, what are you talking about? Lork Bugman said, look over there. As Chairman Ariu said, student Corin, long time no see. Ha. Corin Locke said, oh. Hello, Chairman Ariu. Jaeger Hinspeter, shocked and sweating, said, that rascal. Men too? Lork Bugman said there is definitely something up with that guy. A few moments later, Chairman Ariu said every year, Merkaba Academy's first years conduct a practical training at the hunting ground. Inside the forest, instead of monsters, a few of the outstanding second years will serve as your opponents. My dear first years, you should use whatever means necessary to take them down and retrieve their insignias. Then, let us begin. IV Hunting Ground, a student said, whoa, you are a second rank, huh? There are not that many. Amazing. How about forming a temporary party with us? Wow. His friend said, hey, let me join too. Another said, what a good idea. We should regroup, pick our strategy, and then find our way through the forest. And he said to himself, how annoying. Just a second rank. There is nothing I can do about losing to Princess Miriam, who is a first rank, but to think I am the same rank as those disgusting beast siblings. If it were not for my holy mission, I would have quit the academy on the spot. Last semester, a covert unit from the Order infiltrated the academy to eliminate the monsters, but instead, they were captured. Although Bishop Renaud Lusignan denied any connection to them, in order to save them, they sent me. Germain Luther, From now on, I will hide that I am from the order and pose as a model student at the academy. A student said, "There they are. This way, Germain." Germain Luther said, "Got it." And he said to himself, "They are just third and fourth rank extras, but I will earn their trust by completing the practical training with them." A man with a blade said, "Kike, there are 400 people over here. Do you not feel bad for our seniors even a bit?" Germain Luther said to himself, "At the end of the day, who defeats them first and steals their insignia is the most important. We were told to use any means necessary, right? I will use my skills to lead these kids and pretend to be friends. Hoo-hoo. And when the time comes, I will use them as pawns to achieve my goal." Germain Luther saw a bright light and said to himself, Suddenly a massive explosion occurred. Professor Josephine in a distance said to herself, "Well, this is usually the role of the older students." As she remembered what Corin Locke said before, "New student orientation? I will do it, but for this hunting ground test, please include the returning students that I choose," Professor Josephine said to herself, listening to that request. Sigh. Was it the right choice? Corin Locke said to himself. The new students had no idea, as they looked above in awe, saying, Corin Locke said to himself, who the second years of Merkaba Academy were, as Yuel and her wicker men summon appeared and towers over them casting a huge shadow. Corin Locke said to himself, Yuel, who mastered the ultimate druid technique wicker men in half a year. As a student said, "Wah!" Another blocks a sword and said, "What the hell is that?" Corin Locke said to himself, Drawn, the magic swordsman mercenary who acquired a super expensive magic sword set due to a hugely successful investment. Cornell Rudin, a goalmancer who now controls a super golem. As Cornell Rudin said, "Bah-ha-ha-ha, I cannot believe this." Corin Locke said to himself, thanks to a successful investment and a golem crafting technique someone procured for him. On top of that, someone who needs no further introduction, Warren said, "It's so difficult to hold back like this," as she defeated multiple students. Corin Locke said to himself, lastly, the candidate for the head of the Arden family, Alicia Arden. As a student cries and said, "Wah, run, that person is smiling," Alicia Arden said, "I just smile a lot though." Huh? Another said, "Hick, save me." Another said, "Huff, huff, what the hell?" As Germain Luther frozen in shock. Suddenly Corin Locke said, "Bah-ha-ha, ha." Germain Luther confused said, "Huh?" From the forest Corin Locke came out with a menacing aura. Germain Luther said, "You ran away from a single clown, you pathetic fools." As Germain Luther saw Corin Locke with his infectious smile, a rune of fire, Kina, suddenly activates and exploded. Corin Locke said to himself, Germain had no way of knowing that the person who turned all of Merkaba Academy's notable second years into super soldiers. As Corin Locke quickly hits the other students near him, one by one they fall. As Corin Locke took all of their armbands and approached Germain Luther and said, "Why so serious?" Corin Locke said to himself, was the clown before him. Germain Luther fell to the ground trembling and Corin Locke said, "Hey, smile." As he closely smiled at Germain Luther in fear said, "Gwa." Thanks for tuning in. I truly appreciate each and every one of you who took the time to watch this video. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider sharing my videos or channel with your friends who might also enjoy it. Your support means the world to me and helps my channel grow. Let's keep this community thriving together. Until next time, see you in the next video.